Last week we did a little bit of the metaphysical interpretation of the Christmas story, and today we're going to do a little bit more. But what I want to do is I want you to see that the Christmas story was more than just a beautiful story. It's more than a story about something that took place 2,000 plus years ago. The Christmas story actually holds truly valuable guidance for how to get through what we're going through these days. There are lessons that can be applied to life today, 2,000 years later. So we're going to talk about the Christmas story only so far as to get the examples. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. The first thing that I want you to know about this, the whole Christmas thing, and we've talked about this before as well, is the word Christ. Okay? We often think of it as Jesus' last name. It's not. Okay? Let's just be very clear on that. It is not Jesus' last name. The word Christ at that time was a title given to somebody who was considered anointed. So even a priest who the community felt was anointed could have that title. Okay? So it's Jesus the Christ. If you want, that kind of helps break it up, so that you realize, okay, this is just not his last name. If Christ was his last name and held the same meaning that it does, that would mean that he is the only one that could experience the spiritual truth fully. That means that he is the only one that could express the spiritual truth fully. While he did experience and express it fully, he's not the only one that can. He's just the one that did. And the Christmas story itself shows us how to do that. Shows us how to do that better. So anyway, I just want to be very clear on that, because I sometimes fall into saying Jesus Christ, and it's not his last name. So please don't take it that way. Anyway, there's so much significance in the Christmas story. The first one that comes to mind is the faith that is needed to get through good times as well as bad. Right now, the faith that Mary and Joseph showed, that they portrayed, would be so powerful within us with what we're facing. The division that we see in this country, the pandemic mess that we see, the hatred, the anger, the violence. We need something to help us through. Now, some of us like to try to avoid the news as much as possible, and that does help in a lot of ways. It helps. I'll speak of me personally. It helps me when I stay away from the news. It helps me keep my attitude about life at a higher level. It helps me stay calmer, more peaceful. When I watch the news, I do get attached to some of the stories, and I do get angry sometimes, and I do get upset sometimes, and I do throw my hands up in there and say, "What in the world?" And there's a lot of stuff these days that go, "What? This is nuts." Our faith, having the faith of Mary and Joseph, shows us that no matter what's going on out there, whether we're watching it or not, our faith guides us through. Now, faith is not just a Pollyanna belief. Faith also is an innocence. It's an innocence. And you think about Mary and Joseph. Here they are, pregnant out of wedlock, in a time that a woman could be stoned to death just for the supposition that she was pregnant out of wedlock. Imagine the courage that it took for she, and then Joseph, of course, while he was a man, he probably wouldn't have been stoned to death, but he would have been ridiculed. He would have been horribly treated by the community. It was a very scary situation for them, or it could have been. But they chose the innocence of trusting God, of trusting the path that they had been set upon. They had that innocence. They also had a courage, an incredible courage. So this is all part of faith. Faith is not just sitting back saying, "Okay, God, do what you want." Faith is, I have the innocence to allow my human stuff to take a rest. I have an innocence to just believe that God is guiding me, to believe that I am attached and connected and united with that journey, with that purpose. I have the courage to actually take the steps when I'm led to take the steps. And the last part of faith that we're going to talk about today is vulnerability. You've heard me talk about it a bunch because it's one of my in my opinion, it's one of the most important things that we can embrace is vulnerability. Vulnerability, I don't care how brave you are. A lot of people say, I'm not vulnerable, I'd never go there. If you face any change whatsoever, there's a vulnerability, because what if that change doesn't work? What if that change is a wrong step? What if that change is something that leads me to illness? Whatever. Anytime we face change, whether it's going right at the end of Bear Road or left, if we always go right and we decide to go left, what's that going to lead us to? And just because we know what's down that road doesn't mean that we know what's going to happen as we go down that road. Anytime we make a choice, we're facing change. So those of us that like to hide from change, stop. You're not ever going to get there. It's going to happen. So just know that fear, that avoidance is vulnerability. It's vulnerability in the sense that we're afraid of it. There is a vulnerability that works for us, and that vulnerability is to just know change causes something to be different. I can embrace this vulnerability, and I can have faith that all works to highest good. So that's faith. We can have faith as we're facing this pandemic. We can have faith as we're facing just the uncertain times that are before us all. We can have faith that all works to highest good. And we've got to have that faith. That's the only way we're going to lift ourselves above the fear and the anger and the division. The next thing that the Christmas story talks about, and it kind of follows up with this faith that we just mentioned. It's Jesus born as a baby. This tells us many, many things. One is the innocence that's required to live in our spiritual truth. Now, this doesn't mean like many churches, you sinned. You were born, so you sinned. We won't go there. And I'll just be blunt right now. I think that is a total crock. I really do. We are born innocent. Every baby comes into this world innocent. It is the things we learn along the way that cover up that innocence. And that doesn't mean that we're bad. It just means we took a misstep. We made a choice that didn't quite align with our innocence. But what Jesus being born as a baby tells us is that our spiritual journey is not a boom, voila, abracadabra, you're there. You're born. And we can be reborn every single day into our spiritual truth if we choose to. We're born at one point in our spiritual truth, or one point of awareness, I should say, in our spiritual truth. And as we grow, as we allow our awareness of our spiritual truth grows. We talked a few weeks ago that our spiritual truth is fully intact within us, and there's nothing that we can do to make it bigger, greater, better. It's already as perfect as it can be. But it's our awareness of that truth, our willingness to allow that truth to guide us, that grows. And that's what Jesus born as a baby was all about. He could have, it was a miracle. He could have just showed up at age 30, 33, and still taught the things that he did. But being born as that baby talked to the innocence of the spiritual truth within us. And we can attach to that. We can embrace that anytime we want. We move on through the story, and it tells us about Joseph going to the inn, and then the inn being full. And I think we talked about this last week a little bit. The inn is our mind. If we want to live in our spiritual truth and let our spiritual infinite possibility guide us through life, we have to release those human thoughts that are in our mind that are blocking our connection, our awareness of what's available, what's possible. As we face this pandemic, if we allow our human minds to fill us so fully of fear, we will never see an opportunity for healing, for cure, for better days. Now, this doesn't mean that you just throw away the mask and run out there and have fun. I'm not saying that at all. Your belief system will dictate what you need to do to protect yourself. It will dictate what serves your highest good. And I don't want you to throw that away. Please do not throw that away. But what I am saying is, do not let the fear outweigh the truth that as a spiritual being, you're perfect. You are perfectly whole, perfectly well. And knowing that will allow your body to heal. Knowing that will allow your body to create whatever it is. My belief is that my body creates the immune system that fights this off, that doesn't allow it to take over. I believe that that's my spiritual truth. My spiritual wholeness causes my physical body to respond to that. Not everybody has a belief like that. And somebody asked me the other day, so you have that belief, what happens if you get corona? I said, still in spirit, doesn't matter. What if you die from it? I'm in spirit. Once we get there, once we get into our spirit that Jesus taught us, that consciousness, that Christ consciousness that he taught us, once we get there, all is well. The physical part doesn't matter so much. But anyway, the inn represents the things that block us, and those are things that our human side throws in there. So if we are in fear, if we are letting the news dictate our belief system, that's what's going to develop in our lives. Not that you're going to get sick, but that belief system just becomes more human, more material than it does spiritual. Being born in the stable, though, was very significant, and it's something that we can take with all that's going on around us now. Being born in the stable represented being born into nature, into God. The animals coming around, all of that was natural. It was a peaceful, instead of the busyness of the inn, the busyness of our minds, our thoughts, we had the peace. We had the natural connection. The notion of this connection is represented also with the shepherds coming in, and then the magi coming in a little bit later. When we disconnect from the busyness of life and reconnect to the natural truth, the spirit of us, we're able to see. We open our awareness. We open our consciousness. We often think that to live spiritually, that we have to forfeit material things. You know, I do not remember the exact verbiage, but the rich man asked Jesus how to get to heaven, and Jesus said, "Throw away all your belongings and follow me." We take that to mean that we have to just discard all of our material things and just go live in a cave on a mountaintop, you know, and try to become a guru or something. That's not what it's all about. In the Christmas story, tell us this. When the Magi came, they showed the example that we do not have to throw away material things to live a spiritual life. They brought 3 gifts. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold represents the material possessions. It represents the power to buy something material. It represents, for just about every era in the history of the world, gold has represented power to a lot of people, but it's all material. It's all material. It is when we lose attachment to the material that we still have them, but we have lost the attachment to it, which means we're not worshiping it, it means we're not lifting the material things above spiritual truth. So gold tells us that we don't have to let go of those material things to have a spiritual life. The frankincense also had meaning for us, and that was, frankincense is an essential oil from the resin of a boswellia tree. I guess that's how you say that. The frankincense is used for healing and for religious ceremonies. So this is kind of the metaphysical, if you will. We've got the physical representation in the gold, and then we've got the metaphysical or emotional representation with the frankincense. It shows us that, you know, we can use things to help us get our consciousness where it needs to be. That's how I read this. We can use books that we're reading to help open our awareness. We don't have to just go and work really hard to get to our awareness and our consciousness. You know, it's not I'm going to meditate today and it's going to happen. We don't have to strain everything. We can read. And those things are just guides and tools and resources to help us open our awareness. And that's what frankincense represents. Just as there are some people who believe that medicine is the only way to heal, and there's other people that believe that medicine is just a crutch, that it's not going to help you heal, it's all up in your mind and your spirit. Whatever you believe is your truth. My belief is if you choose to take medicine to assist you, but you allow your spiritual truth to be the main source of healing, I think you're there. You know, I think that's what this frankincense represents. And then we come to myrrh, which is an embalming ointment. And this embalming ointment for, in terms of how we use embalming today, I get, and how it's been used all along, most of the time, it's kind of significant of death. But what embalming is It was an ointment that was used, and the way that it was used initially was a symbolic beginning to a new life, a symbolic beginning to a new existence and experience. So what we get from this Christmas story that serves us today is that when we bring all of it together, we have a guide to make it through anything. We have the material world, and if we use that material world properly without holding attachment to it, we can use the tools and the resources available on the physical realm to assist us to get through, to overcome, to heal, whatever the case may be. That's why the vaccine, if we see the vaccine as the only cure, don't know how it's going to work. But if we see the vaccine as a resource towards healing, it's all in how it's just different words, but the belief behind it is huge. If we see the vaccine as a resource, it may very well be a great tool for us. Anyway, we can keep going with that, but the physical world, we can find the resources and tools that help us get there. The metaphysical world, we can see things differently. We can see a situation, and we can see beyond the physical appearance of that situation. We can see truth. It's like when you're talking to somebody and you know the words that they're saying are one thing, but the meaning behind those words is something totally different. That's kind of the metaphysical. It's not making stuff up about them, but sometimes you just have that intuition, that knowing. And then you have the spiritual, which is new beginning. No matter what's coming at you, with everything that presents itself to you, there is a new beginning. And if we allow it, that new beginning can be magical and beautiful and loving and peaceful and whatever it is that serves us best. That's what the Christmas story tells us about, and we know that even more with King Herod. And this is going to be the last topic. I know I'm running a little bit long, so I apologize. King Herod can be seen as our ego self. King Herod feared the coming of Christ. He didn't fear that little kid was going to come beat him up. He didn't fear that little kid would kill him. He feared the belief system that people had towards this child. And he believed that was going to take his power away. That's what our ego does to us. That's why faith is so important, because our ego is going to tell us that any change is going to take away our power. Any change is going to harm us. It's what our ego does. So we go back to faith. We go back to knowing that our ego serves a purpose. It allows us to experience this physical world, but that's all it's supposed to do. Anything else is power that I've given away from my truth. Christmas is a time of peace, love, and joy. It's a time of light. That beautiful Christmas story, you saw hardships, you saw danger, you saw love, you saw peace, you saw guidance, you saw wisdom. The only difference between that story and what we face today is a length of time, and according to a lot of teachings, time's an illusion. We're facing many, many, many situations that cover the spectrum of good to bad. When we allow our Christ consciousness, that truth within us, our connection, our oneness with God, when we allow that to be our guide, when we turn to that before we react, we will have the guidance we need. We will have the results that we desire. We'll have the results we need. So let this Christmas season be an example to how you can live every single day of your life. And as always, on those days that you don't live that example, because there will be some, don't beat yourself up. Don't get down on yourself. Don't decide that you can't do it. Just forgive yourself and move on to the next day. So let's close with that, and then we'll end with prayer today. Father God, thank you so much for the beautiful story. You know, the Christmas story is so much fun to read because it is such a beautiful story in so many different ways. We just pray that the meanings of that story reflect in our expression in our experience of life. Let us use this story as a guide. Let us find wisdom and love, and let us open our awareness to our spiritual truth even more, each and every day. Thank you, Father, Mother, God. Amen.